If you are ever in the area, please join us here in Troy, Ohio. Our service begins at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings. This morning, Pastor John is out of the pulpit, and Reverend Don Crist will be here providing our sermon for us. He's a return sermoner, and we're happy you're here with us, Pastor Don. We appreciate it very much. Our scripture this morning, Psalm 104, verses 24 to 30. O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. There is the sea, great and wide. Creeping things innumerable are there. Living things both small and great. There go the ships and Leviathan that you formed to sport in it. These all look to you to give them their food in due season. When you give to them, they gather it up. When you open your hand, they are filled with good things. When you hide your face, they are dismayed. When you take away their breath, they die and return to their dust. When you send forth your spirit, they are created, and you renew the face of the ground. And from Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Please welcome Pastor Don Crist.
Sound on. Is it working? Are you hearing? Good. I am just delighted to be back here again. This is, I think, the third time, if I remember correctly. And I just enjoy being here and seeing you, and from some familiar faces and a few people who dared to come that didn't come last time. I suppose you thought that I would pass out a game, but I didn't. And if you didn't understand that reference, I did that the last time I was here, or the time before I passed out card games to Church of the Brethren people, you know. And anyway, you'd had to have been there to have got that. It's a good thing to be here at John's church, and I have such great respect and admiration for John, and he's made a lasting impression on my life, and I so appreciate our times together, although he never offers to pay for my coffee. I'll call the office this week and complain. Well, he would remind you that I don't offer to pay his either, so. And thanks to all of you who've participated in the service in one way or another this morning, including getting me hooked up with the sound system and risking showing my wife where my on and off switch is. Well, I don't know. Some of you look like you might be retired. I am retired, and I retired twice. The first time it didn't take, and so I was a few years outside of retirement. Went back to work at St. John's UCC Church here in town, and spent some time there. and enjoyed that time. And then I retired again about a year and a half, 2 years ago now. And when I don't know what happens when you have retired or what your experience with that is, but I found myself reviewing my life a lot after I retired. And I sit at home and I try to think, well, now what do I do today? And I always find something to do, but I wonder about my ministry and what I did in my time at the church. Did I do the right things? Did I do enough? Did I do too little, too much? And so one of the gaps in my ministry, I think, that as I look back and things that I sort of regret that I didn't spend more time talking to the people at the churches where I pastored, is this. I think that I probably should have spent more time reminding each of us and reminding myself of just the amazing, first of all, the amazing beauty of the world that we have inherited, that we have been loaned for a few years, a few decades is all it is, and it goes so quickly, doesn't it? But I was thinking about that beauty, and we just don't think about it often enough. We are not, I think, at least I'm not grateful enough for this amazing planet and universe that we have inherited for a little while. God has put it all for us and for our use and for our tending. And I think we need to be reminded of it once in a while and then reminded of the responsibility we have. This is quite a world to take care of. And we have been called from the very beginning, early stories of Genesis, we've been called to care for the earth, tend to it, and sustain it, and care for it like we would a child, like we would our own flesh and blood. We are called to do that. And I don't think we do it as well or as often as we should. Actually, when I look around these days, when I look around at what people are doing, I don't think they have time to be thankful for the earth. Do you know what I mean? I was sitting at the doctor's office. No, it wasn't the doctor's office. I was sitting there, but that's not what I'm talking about. I was sitting in a restaurant. A family of 5 walked in, and they sat in the little cushioned area where we can sit and wait for our table to be called and, our time to go and eat. And all 5 of the family pulled out their cell phones and started doing this number. All 5 of them, every one. And I thought, that's a sort of a story of our culture, isn't it? We don't have time to look at what's blooming in the spring. We don't have time to look what's growing. I'm glad that I do something. And I was going to say, it's good to see Bob and Marianne here. Because we got a lot of our plants that are in our backyard and are thriving now from you when you left town. They gave it to us. We didn't take it, but they gave us these things, and we planted them, and we are really grateful. And I know that they take care. I know that they notice the earth and the beauty of it, and appreciate that. Well, anyway, I was thinking about how preoccupied we are with our schedules. We have 5 daughters between us, and we have something like 18 grandchildren. If somebody hasn't gone and added one, 18 grandchildren. And they're all busy all the time. They're busy day in, day out, from start of the day to the end of the day, with chores and activities and appointments and schedules and transporting people here and there. And I think about that's the way our whole culture is. We don't have time to even sit and really enjoy the beauty of the earth that God has created for us. This earth of ours is the creative work of an invisible God. If you were to ask any artist today, and you would come up to them and say, I need your help. I would like to get to know Georgia O'Keeffe. You know Georgia O'Keeffe, the artist? She died in 1986. If you went to an artist and said, I would like to get to know Georgia O'Keeffe, they would say, well, you do know she died. Yes, I do know she died. I want to get to know her anyway. And you know what they'd tell you? You know what they'd tell you. Go find one of her paintings. She has such delightful paintings. Paintings of the natural world. Go try to find one of her paintings. Go to a museum, a number of museums have her paintings. And just find yourself a seat by the painting and sit there and look at her painting. And let it and absorb it. Spend time with it. Ask it questions. Learn what it's got to tell you. That's how you're going to get to know Georgia O'Keeffe. How would you suppose we ought to go about getting to know God? I'm thinking we should go and spend some time with God's created pieces of artwork and just sit and absorb. That isn't the only way to get to know God, but we don't want to miss that one, because that's a very important way for us to get to know this God that we love. A few years ago now, my sister's 4 years younger than me, and I still haven't trained her well yet. She lives in Florida, and she works at, she's in Michigan at the moment, but she lives in Florida most of the year. And she works at the church. And she does things like visitation and keeping track of people and that come in that aren't usually there, or people that aren't there and they usually are. And she keeps all track of all of that and does a lot of visitation in hospitals and so on. Anyway, so we talk a lot, and every few days we'll be apt to talk to one another. And there was a period of time when she was just being inundated with all kinds of stressors that were really getting her down. And so when either of us go through a stressful time in our lives, we're apt to call the other one and get some good help and encouragement. So she was calling me about that and going over all of her stressors. And then she said, but the one good thing is I'm headed for the coffee shop. And I said to her, I know how you love the coffee shop. And I just think that's a wonderful thing that you're taking time out of your stressful time in this hard place you're going through. And I think it's a great idea. I've been asking you to do it for weeks now, and you haven't been doing anything, and she keeps putting it off. Today she said, I'm going. I said, good. And I was so grateful she was, because we need that kind of break away from our stressful times. And so just before we hung up with one another, I said to her, now, Carol, when you go to the coffee shop, pay attention. And Carol said, to what? I don't know. I work hard to train her. It doesn't matter to what. Just don't be a zombie when you're there in the coffee shop. Be in the moment. Be alert. This is God's world. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the coffee shop or in the garden or standing by the ocean. Pay attention. Because you never know when you're going to be spoken to out of the void. A voice will come to you. You will hear something, maybe not with your physical ears, but you will hear, you will see, you will know something that you didn't know before. You'll connect with somebody that you didn't know before. You'll have this experience of a voice from God, and you'll know that it's from God. You just have to stop what you're doing. You have to look and listen and see and pay attention. The first major time when I learned those kinds of things was a time when I was going through a huge upheaval in my life. I'd just gone through a divorce. I had just had my first retirement. My family was in chaos. And this lasted for a period of time, but thankfully that period of chaos ended with marrying that woman who's made a huge difference in my life, Mary Ann. And I was so grateful, and I'm continuing to be so grateful for that. When we got married, we sat down and sort of compared some notes. We both had bucket lists. You know what they are, don't you? Things you're going to do before you die. And you don't usually make them until you're got gray hair or lost your hair like me. But in any case, we started comparing notes. We both had made our bucket list, and you know, travel was number one on our list, and Italy was number two. And in the middle of this stressful time, we said to one another, I think we should do something to get out of this stress, to get back in touch with the open, wide open world of God that's not so painful, with the things of beauty. I think we should do something. We should get out of this place. We should leave town. We should go on a trip. Where should we go? Well, Italy. Why not? So we did. We took all of our things that we owned. We took our vehicle and we put it in storage. We sold or stored most all of our belongings that we had, and what we stored, we put in a little tiny storage compartment that you can rent down the street. We let our apartments expire, the leases expire. We got tickets to Europe, and we spent about 5 years getting intimately acquainted with this grand world that we have been commissioned to take care of. We didn't care for the earth during that 5 years, but the earth cared for us. God's earth, God's greatness, God's beauty, God's creation wrapped God's arms around us in that way and healed us. And I have never been the same. That amazing experience and others like it has changed me. It has changed my theology. We tend to think that looking at the natural world doesn't have much of an impact. But I want to tell you that that made a difference in my theology. You can't see the world without having your theology changed and challenged. I got introduced to a God that was bigger than any God I had ever known. A God that was bigger than our religion, a God that was bigger than our theology. It was certainly beyond anything ever written to describe God, and beyond any institution established to try to define God. I learned more, and I learned different things in that 5 years when I was wandering the world with Mary Ann than I ever learned at the church, in the church pew. I'm not saying it was better. I'm saying it was different. It was another way for me to find out about God, to learn about God. And it's a way that I couldn't learn it in the church pew. And I learned it out there in the world. I am utterly convinced that the hand of God was at work in our lives through that experience and through our doing our part, which was breaking away to pay attention. We didn't see the full significance of that experience that we had in our lives, but that decision to drop our lists, drop our expectations, our shoulds and our oughts, and thoughtfully see the wonder of the world, not just its physical beauty, But I can't tell you the number of faces that every so often in my life come to my head as clear as I'm almost that I was standing with them, of people whose names I don't know, but whom I encountered around the world. And I said, so thankful to God. I'm so thankful to God for the variety. Why are we doing such things that we are doing to our immigrants these days? These are God's people. And we need to be responsive and care for God's people. One little illustration from the Bible, the Old Testament. Was that text that you had read to you, was that familiar? I bet it was. I bet you've heard that text read to you since you were a child, many of you. What a classic story that is, and how big it is. So much bigger than a story about one man who had heard the call of God. It talks to us. It ought to talk to us. Here's Moses. I don't know, could have been maybe about 40 years old. I don't know how old he was. He was an adult, grown man. He was married. And he did like many people did. His father owned a business of raising sheep. His father-in-law, I should say, his wife's father, owned a business, and he put him to work after they'd gotten married. And so he was out in the field, and he's tending sheep. That's his job, tended sheep. Not the high schedule kind of job that you had and you have to live with. This was out there in the field. I think he had about 40 years of preparation for this moment, this one day when he got up on a morning, and in this wilderness, in this dry, barren place where these sheep were grazing, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something. He'd been in training to experience something, in training to pay attention, in training to listen for 40 years, or for however long he was with those sheep. And he knew how to do it. And he saw this out of his corner of his eye. And Moses, being the kind of person that he was, said in a critical turn of the story, I must turn and see this thing, this bush that is burning. I have to turn and see. I must turn aside and look. That's the critical moment. And when Moses said that to himself, I must turn aside and see, his life was never the same. Everything after that was radically shifted because Moses decided to pay attention in this beautiful world of ours and heard God speak to him out of a bush. Now, don't you ask me to tell you what that was like, because I wasn't there. I'm 85, but I wasn't there. I don't know what it was like. I don't know if he smelled the smoke or anything. I don't know anything about that. All I know is he had some dramatic awareness that he was on holy ground and something was about to happen and he needed to pay attention to it. And it is that awareness, that alertness to the voice of God coming out of the nature or out of other people or people that we're not familiar with. It is that awareness that changes our lives. We say, well, God never calls me. I want to say, how long has it been since you paid attention? How long has it been since you have been able to break away from the busyness of this world to hear a voice from another? The story of Moses is not being told to us so that we can take it so literally that we walk around in the wilderness and watch for burning bushes. The story of Moses is you never know. When you put yourself in a place with the kind of awareness that says, I am here, I am available, and we are listening, you just don't know when you can possibly hear a voice out of a bush. You may have never heard of Ghost Ranch. We went to a retreat at Ghost Ranches in New Mexico, right in the middle of the high desert. By the way, it's a Georgia O'Keeffe country. We went into the workshop, 20 of us, I don't know, sat down with our teacher, and our teacher said, I'm going to give you an assignment. Instead of sitting here in this workshop and listening to me, he said, I want you to go out there in the sand, in the sun, the heat, and the rocks, and the desert, and gawk. You ever heard that word? Gawk. What was he saying? Our lives need space. Our lives need openness. We need to break away from the routine. And if we don't get that space, we run the risk of not hearing a word from God. He said, I don't care what you do out there. Talk to the trees if you want, see if they talk back. But to spend this hour gawking, paying attention. We need practice. We need practice. I told you we had $5 between us. Boy, what did I do? Why did I earn that? $5. Whew. Anyway, Marianne's told me her daughter's stories, and they're just like my daughter's stories. She's got two. One's Sarah in California, and in about less than 2 weeks now, a week or so, we're going to be out there to see Sarah and her family. She was 16 once, they all were. And her mom and dad, at the time, took her out to see the West. Did you ever take a trip with your kids? Go out to see the West. That's what they need. They need to see the West, right? Right? So you take them, you get the teenagers in the back seat and mom and dad in the front seat, and you go through the Wild West. And so they did. They went through the Badlands. They went through Grand Tetons. They went through Theodore Roosevelt Park, National Park, and then they went to Yellowstone. And there in the middle of the geysers and the canyons and the waterfalls and the boiling springs, there came a voice from the back seat with typical teenage insistence. I am not getting out of the car one more time. I'm staying here, and I'll play my games and listen to my music. Bye. Did they do right? Did they do not wrong? How do you know? With teenagers, you lose your mind, so you don't know. They decided to let her have her way, and they went out. The three of them, mom, dad, and the younger one. And they looked at all of this. She's 46, Sarah is. Just 2 or 3 years ago, she came to her mom and she said, Mom, I wish I'd have gotten out of the car Do you hear that? Do you hear what that means to our spiritual life? Do we want to get to the end of life and say, I wish I'd have paid attention? Because Moses didn't see the last burning bush. He just saw one. There's no question that we live in a world where the pressure to keep up with our neighbors and advance our careers and fill our time with good things to do is enormous. There is no question that carving out space for quiet, for gawking, for listening, and for wonder is not easy. And there is no question that those who observe us wasting time like that, they won't understand. But you can't hear a call if you don't make the effort to turn and look. You can't find the next place God wants to use you if you have no space in your life for a new word. You can't be transformed by wonder if you never dare to look. Amen. And if I didn't have some concern when I tell you to do whatever it takes to encounter your own burning bush and the voice of God. Because I know what happened to Moses. His life was changed, and it was hard. But he followed God. And I say to you, go in peace today. I do hope you see a burning bush. And I can only say that because I know that the one who calls is also the one who promises to stay by your side. From the call to the end. Amen.